And so in the interest of full disclosure, I'm going to tell you something. I came from a big family, 7 children in my family. And so when I got married to Kathy, I decided I wanted to have a big family. And we went back and forth on this quite a bit because I wanted, this is true, I wanted to have 10 children. Yeah, I wanted to have 10. Kathy wanted to have 3. So we compromised and had 3. Men, you do know how this works, don't you? You do know how it works.
Welcome to Church of the Rock from Winnipeg. Stay tuned to this week's thought-provoking message from Pastor Mark Hughes.
Does anyone know what time it is? It's tool time. Yes, I am Tim the Tool Man Taylor. And I'm glad to be here with you. You know that Tim Allen played Tim the Tool Man Taylor on Home Improvement in the 90s. You remember this? And he grunted 662 times in 203 episodes. Can you believe someone counted the grunts? But nevertheless, that's who he is. And let me tell you about Tim the Tool Man Taylor. He was the stereotypical male that loved cars and power tools and, of course, sports. And he had a cable TV home improvement show called Tool Time, right? And he shamelessly promoted the Binford line of tools. And this was his line, because we're going to need this through this series, and it goes like this. If you have a job to do and you want to do it well and you want to do it fast, what do you need? Oh, please, really? The answer is more power. Everybody say more power. Now, the thing about Tim the Tool Man Taylor was that he was spectacularly accident prone. And in every episode on his TV show, he would cause some calamity where there'd be an explosion, a fire, or some injury, usually to himself. And it would usually parallel something that was going on at home where he was causing his own calamity with his, his wife and his kids. And even though the show was in the 90s, I think people loved the show because there was something normal about it. I mean, here's a man and his wife, Jill, and his 3 boys, and, he sort of went through life and did life, and we could relate to it. Even though things were, relatively overstated, at least we could relate to it. And I've already had people criticize me when they saw that the title was Home Improvement. They thought, well, that show's 20 years old. Couldn't you come up with something more current? And to which I said, like what? Like Modern Family? Like that's going to happen. Or how about The Family Guy, and have a talking dog and a little baby that acts like an adult and is obsessed with violence and killing his mother? These are family shows today. And so, you know what? I'm going to just draw a blast from the past, and I'm going with Tool Time. That's just the way it's going to be. And so this is what I'm going to do. Every week, I'm going to reach into this tool belt of mine, and I'm going to pull out a different tool that is going to be a tool in your belt to help you to be a parent or a child or an aunt or an uncle or grandmother or whatever. And we're going to talk about the tools of parenting. Because if you have a job to do and you want to do it well and you want to do it fast, what do you need? More power. Darn right, more power. And today we're going to be talking about the Binford series, 8200 laser level, 8200 lumens of laser power that can burn the retina out of the back of your head from across the room. That's what I'm talking about. Right? And so, this is really one of the greatest tools ever, in my opinion, because you will remember the old school way of leveling things. And I'll just put this away for a moment. And that was this thing. Do you remember this thing? The old bubble level? And you take this little thing, you stick it on something, and you sort of painstakingly try to eyeball it and try to get the bubble in the middle. And then it's level, right? And that's a bit of a metaphor for the middle-aged man. He's on the level because his bubble is in the middle. Right? I can't say that because here I am 60 years old and still have, wash tub, six-pack abs. So what more can I tell you about that? But nevertheless, this stupid little thing has caused more problems than anything else. And so then they came up with the laser level. And my children, a few years ago, got all their money together because they're not cheap. And they put their money together and they bought me the Binford Series 8200 laser level. And I just had so much fun with it. And sorry about burning out your retina, but it's just got to happen for the sake of the series. And so, it was really not the building season, so I had to start using it. So the first thing I did is I went around the house and I leveled all the pictures. in the house. And every single picture is perfectly level. How many of you like the level pictures in your house? How many of those people, you go to a hotel room, and if the picture's crooked, you straighten it? Who are those people? Yeah, I'm that guy. They call them OCD, by the way. Or as I like to say it's CDO, because it's more alphabetically correct. How many of you have a crooked picture in your house, and there's not a thing you're going to do about it? How many of you people? Yeah, there's all kinds of people like that. You don't care, don't notice. I am not that guy. I am the guy that got the laser level for a reason. I want everything plumb and everything straight. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about laying the foundation. When it comes to building anything, nothing is more important than the foundation. And it's true with the family. If your foundation of your family is not level and it's not strong and it's not stable, guess what? It is going to collapse around you. There's nothing more important in it. How many of you are builders, either professional or amateur in the room? How many builders do we have? We have a few builders here. And how many of you would verify what I'm saying, that if your foundation is out of level, everything else is going to be crooked? Is that right? Is that right? People are putting up their hands. And, if the thing is off, it's pretty much impossible because everything else is out of whack from the get-go. Now, let me ask you this question. I know you all know this illustration. And how many of you are familiar with the Leaning Tower of Pisa? You all know this. You looked at it growing up in school. How many of you have actually been there? How many of you have been to Italy and seen it? A bunch of you have seen it. And here's a picture of it. And you can see it's 4 degrees off axis. It is famous because it is not straight. And here's the story. The story is extraordinary. They began constructing it in 1173 AD, so almost 1,000 years ago. They did not have the Binford 8200 in those days. And so they had to rely on some other method. And this is what happened. They started building it. By the time it was 15 feet high, it had already sunk. There was so much block in that, and it's so incredibly heavy that the thing sunk on one side. You know why? Because they had not built the foundation correctly. And so they actually continued to build it over a period of 200 years. And they couldn't straighten the thing up. So you know what they did? And if you look at the picture, they continued to try to adjust it as they went up. And if you look at it, it's actually curved like a tree trying to grow towards the sun. And they tried to straighten the thing out, but the higher they built, guess what? The more it went off axis. And so anyway, they finished the stupid tower completely crooked from the get-go. And of course, people go to look at it because it's crooked, so maybe it was a good thing in that sense. But nevertheless, it was a problem from the very start. And so when it comes to the foundation of your family, I'm going to tell you there is one thing, one single thing that is more important than anything else to do with your foundation, and I'm going to give you an illustration to show it to you. I got to get something. Just wait there. Talk amongst yourself. All right, I'm back. And it's this. This is my Bible. No joke. This is actually my Bible. There's a story behind it. I know it looks like something I stole from the Vatican. And but in fact, I actually own this Bible. This is not the one I read every day. But when I read the inscription in this, all of a sudden it's going to come clear what the meaning of this Bible is. Now listen to this carefully. It says, presented to Joseph Henry and Anna Maria Hughes as a wedding gift on February 21st, 1883, at London, Ontario, by Joseph Cooper Hughes, father of the groom. This Bible is the Hughes family Bible that was presented by my great-great-grandfather to my great-grandfather on his wedding day. And then my great-grandfather gave it to my grandfather. And then my grandfather gave it to my father. And my father gave it to me. And when my son gets married, I will give it to him. Yes, ladies, he's single. And he's, just in case you don't know him, he's easy to spot. He's a taller, younger, better looking, smarter, more athletic version of me. What's not to like? Now, that is aside, he'll be mad at me about that one. The foundation of our family, even though I don't read this Bible, it's impossible for me to misplace it. I always know where it is, and it's in my home, and it is a symbol of how we have built our family. Joshua said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And the hymnist said this. He said that on Jesus Christ, the solid rock I stand, all other ground is shifting sand. You see, if we don't have a solid foundation, how is our marriage, how is our family, how is our life going to survive in this world where marriage and family is under attack. So we're going to start here. I'm going to take you to a verse in Malachi chapter 4. This is the very last thing that God said in the Old Testament. And then there was 400 years of prophetic silence. God did not even whisper for 400 years until John the Baptist came along. And when you have the last thing someone says, oftentimes it is the most important thing. And it's phenomenal when you look at this as to what God said at the end of the New Testament as he was waiting for the New Testament. And it says this, Malachi chapter 4, verse 6. And he said he was going to send up the prophet Elijah. And then it says this, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. Now I want you to think about this for a minute. Why didn't he say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn the hearts of the fathers to their wives and the hearts of the wives to the fathers. I mean, that would have been okay too, I think. It would have been a validation of marriage. But that's not what he said. And you know why I think he said this? You know why I think he said to turn the hearts of the children to the fathers to the children? Is I think because otherwise we may have inferred that what he meant was that we can love our wives and ignore our children, which has often been a historic problem. You have the men, allowing their wives to raise the children while they go off and storm the castle and slay the dragon, which is precisely what men even do today, and they call it a career, right? And they're so busy letting somebody else do this. And so God specifically says, now he wants you to love your wife, and wives, he wants you to love your husbands. I know they're unlovable, but that's just the way it is. And he says, I'm going to turn the hearts of the fathers towards their family. And what he is saying is that there's nothing more important in this world than family. And I hope you didn't miss the reference. He said that if that doesn't happen, he says the earth will be struck with a curse. And if the family fails, everything else fails. And so I'm going to give you three things. They're kind of just comments on the foundation of the family, laying the foundation. Here's what they are. I'll throw them on the screen. Number one, as goes the family, so goes the nation. Number two, the family that stands together stands together, and that'll make sense when I get to it. And the last thing, the family is our highest calling. Now, the first thing is this. As goes the family, so goes the nation. That was a quote by Pope John Paul II, by the way. And what he was saying was, all you have to do is follow where the family goes. And if the family is strong, your society will be strong. And if the family gets weakened or broken, then everything else is in jeopardy. I want you to think about what God did, the beginning of the whole story. God creates the earth, this wonderful place. And then the very, very first thing he does is he establishes the family. A man, Adam, and his wife, Eve, and their children, Cain and Abel and Seth and so forth. And the entire narrative of the scripture, from beginning to the very end, is the narrative about family. I mean, that is the story from beginning to end. Because think about this. Kingdoms come and kingdoms go, but the family has stood. We look at the different forms of government. Even in Scripture, we've got the rule of law and the rule of judges and the rule of kings. And you have different forms of government throughout the ages. They have come and gone. But the family has stood. And it doesn't matter where you look in the world, we've experimented with every kind of form of government, right? We've got communism, we've got capitalism, we've got socialism, we've got fascism, we've got Nazism. All these things have come and gone, but the family remains and stands. Why? Because the family itself is the very foundation of our society. And as goes the family, so goes the nation. Now, the reason I bring this up is that we are living in a day and age where the family is under siege. We are being attacked. The very institution and fabric of the family has been attacked from every single side. I mean, all you have to do is see what governments are doing. The taxation laws no longer favor the traditional family. When you look at what pop culture is doing, pop culture has dismissed marriage as something archaic and really unnecessary. And you look at the movie stars and the pop stars and the rock stars, and they live in this wanton, careless way with multiple partners and children from all kinds of different people. And the disregard for the family, the presentation and the example that we see is profound. I mean, you got a guy like Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones, when he was 72 years old, had his 8th child from the 5th different woman. He was only married to one of those women, and he had 8 children from 5 different women. And have you seen that baby? Have you seen the picture of this last baby? Check it out. I mean, this is the ugliest baby I've ever seen. Right? I'd ask that question. How's this all working for us? Well, not very well. Do you know that 73% of African American children born in the U.S. today are born out of wedlock? 73%. You go look it up if you don't believe that. 63% of Hispanics. And it's not much better in Canada. In the province of Quebec, 65% of all children today born in Quebec are born out of wedlock. There is something wrong with this picture. This cannot end well, because he said, I will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I strike the earth with a curse. We are on the bubble, people. Do you not agree? As far as the family goes. And then we have governments all over the world, democratic Western governments, that are redefining the family and redefining marriage. And they have all these new definitions of what the family really is and what marriage really is. And you got to wonder where this is all going to go. Now let me give you a little caveat here, because I'm going to talk pretty politically incorrect for just a moment here. But let me say this, you know, when it comes to how people want to live in our world, and if people want to live in a particular union, you know what? It's not really our place to tell them they shouldn't. You say, what? I thought it is our place. Well, not really. I mean, why would we tell someone to obey God's laws if they don't believe in the very God who had the laws? And so it's a fool's errand for us to go around and tell people you shouldn't live like that or you shouldn't do that. And, you know, my answer is a little bit like Crocodile Dundee's. It's none of my business. And it really, you know, how people want to live and how they want to live together, in one sense, it's none of your business. But on the other hand, here's why we need to talk about it. Because how else are our young people going to navigate the troubled waters of this secular culture that shifts and moves and is so confusing? How are they going to navigate those waters if we don't talk about this in church and tell them what God says about this? And that's why it's important for us to bring this up. And I don't, you know, what the world does is up to them. But I'm going to help the young people understand the biblical mandate of what God says the family is all about. God invented marriage. The institution of marriage belongs to God. And if you invent something, you have the right and privilege to define what it is. And this is what he said. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, full stop. That is a marriage, the union between one man and one woman to the exclusion of all others. That's marriage. And so I know some of you think, well, you know, I've read the Bible, the Old Testament, and you got all this polygamous stuff. Well, you know what that polygamous stuff is? It's nonsense. Really, those guys were not doing God's ideal. Don't believe it for a minute. You come into the New Testament, you find out Jesus validates this one man, one woman, the Adam and Eve model that he began with. Paul says that an elder in the church needs to be the husband of one wife, and it's just that clear that that is how we are to live as Christians. And what the rest of the world does, you know, it's none of our business, really. There's nothing we can do about it. And so in the interest of full disclosure, I'm going to tell you something. I came from a big family, 7 children in my family. And so when I got married to Kathy, I decided I wanted to have a big family. And we went back and forth on this quite a bit because I wanted, this is true, I wanted to have 10 children. Yeah, I wanted to have 10. Kathy wanted to have 3. So we compromised and had 3. Men, you do know how this works, don't you? You do know how it works. So the first thing is this: as goes the family, so goes the nation. The second thing is this: the family that stands together, lasts. See, Jesus said this. He said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. He said it cannot stand. And here's what's going to happen in the world in which we live in. We are going to encounter the storms of life and the storms of a secular culture. And if we haven't built our foundation of the family strong, our families, even as Christian people, our families are going to collapse under the weight of this. Let me tell you a little story about this. And it's the story of Abraham. You know, when you think of Abraham, you often think of him and Sarah. I mean, they're 100 years old when they had their first child, right? And so how many of you imagine the two of them sitting out in the rocking chair, you know, from 80, 90 to 100 years old, waiting for the first kid to come along, living in this little house somewhere? Nothing could be further from the truth in that picture. You see, in Abraham's day, people didn't live in nuclear families like we do today. People lived in extended families. And Abraham was part of a very large family. And the patriarch of the family was a man named Terah. And Terah was Abraham's father. And there was Abraham, and there was his brother Haran. And Haran had a son named Lot. Now, I know that name rings a bell. And so this is what happened in that family. Haran was the first to die. And so when Haran died, The father, Terah, remained the patriarch of the family, but then Terah died. And so now what happened was Abraham, this is long before Isaac was ever born, Abraham became the patriarch of that family, and he essentially adopted Lot as his own son, even though he was his nephew, and even though Lot was actually a grown man with a wife and children of his own. And so he had him as part of his family. And so his family, they traveled to Canaan's land. And some of you remember this story because that's where God was sending them to establish the Jewish nation. And when they got there, they prospered so much that they couldn't actually keep their goods straight. And the herdsmen of Lot and the herdsmen of Abraham were fighting and stuff. And so Abraham finally said, you know what, Lot, we're going to actually have to branch out. And we're going to have to send you and your bunch this way and start a new branch of the family because it's just become too big. And so he says, where do you want to go and where do you want to live? And so Lot says, well, I want to live over there in the well-watered plain of the Jordan. And so Abraham said, have at it. And so off Lot went with his bunch and his herdsmen and whoever else he had with him, and away he went. And Abraham, he remained in the high country of what's called Hebron. And he lived in this place. Well, shortly thereafter, as Lot dwelt near the city of Sodom, what happened, there was a war down in the Jordan Valley. And there was 4 kings attacked 5 kings, and the 4 kings defeated the 5 kings. And 2 of those kings were the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah. And because Lot lived in that area, his people were defeated, and he and his family were taken as captives to these 4 kings. Now, it didn't affect Abraham because he lived up in Hebron, and when he heard the news that his nephew, which was basically his son, had been taken captive, this is what he did. Don't miss this number. It says he armed 318 of his servants who had been born in his house. He and Sarah weren't living alone. He had 318 men with their own families that lived in his house, that were part of his family. And he took all 318 of them, and they went to war against those 4 kings, defeated the 4 kings, got all the goods back, and saved Lot and his family. Now, here's what I don't want you to miss. What do you think the potential was of him actually losing everything and being defeated by 4 kings? 318 people against 4 kings? The odds were stacked against him. He put everything on the line. You see, that's what family does. You risk it all because the only thing that really matters at the end of the day is your family. I want you to think about something. Your family will endure more grief, more heartache, more challenges, more pain, more betrayal from people than anyone else in this world. Your family will put up with you. Have you noticed that? When nobody else in this world would. Only your family has. And when I see families today that are crumbling and estranged and can't get along and won't talk to each other, I think it's the most grievous thing I can even imagine. Because only the family that stands together will actually stand together. And that's why family is so important. And the last and the final thing is this, is I truly believe that the family is the highest calling. There's a lot of things we can do with our life, right? You can make a mark in this world. You can do a lot of things. You can invent things. You can, cure cancer. Maybe you'll do that. That'd be great. You can do well in your business. There's a lot of things you can do. And they're all important. But your highest calling, the calling that is above anything else, is the calling to family. And God gives us this remarkable privilege. And he says, this is what matters. And what I really care about is turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. And I mean, think of parenting for a moment. Is there anything more ridiculous than parenting? I mean, this baby comes into the world, and I mean, it's got no instruction manual. And they say they come assembled. They don't really come assembled. I mean, maybe the raw material is there, but you got to shape this into something. And I mean, we recently became grandparents for the very first time, and I'm now reminded what it was all about. I mean, when a horse is born, any of you ever seen a horse born even on television? I mean, a horse comes into this world, comes out the back end of the mare. 2 hours later, the horse gets around and walks around. You know what it does the next day? Goes for a run. You know what a baby does when it's born? Nothing. It just lies there, helpless, and doesn't do anything, and expects you to do everything for it. It's completely, totally, utterly dependent. It can't walk, it can't talk, it can't feed itself, it can't change itself. And when they're first born, they can't even hold their head up. Oh, support its head, oh, support its head. It can't even hold its head up, this floppy little thing. It comes into the world, and you hold it up, and your first mission for the next year is to just not to kill it. And, you know, it's so helpless and so defenseless, and it can't do anything for itself. And it just lies there, doing nothing. And it will lie there, having you take care of it for the next about 14 years. Really. Till finally you go, hey, it's coming into itself. And you know, you think, why is it so dependent? I mean, you maybe have 18, 20 years to form this child. You say, why are they so dependent? I mean, you know, in some species, the parents actually eat the young. And so, you know, the quicker they get out of the nest, the better. And, you know, and we have these humans, and, you know, if we don't do anything, they'll die. And so we have to keep them alive and make them valuable to society. And see, here's the whole mission. Why would God do that? Why would God make you commit 20 years of your life to raising the next generation? Because you have a job higher than any other job you have, to raise the next generation to be productive, effective, faith-filled people that are going to leave their world a better place than where they came in. That's what parenting and family is all about. Yeah, you can cheer. Let me close with one final story here. Do we have any hockey fans at all in the room? Any here? Any? Oh, okay, we have a few. Good, it's Winnipeg. I want to tell you a hockey story. Some of you would know Canadian hockey player, NHL player, Colin Fraser. And Colin Fraser, he's from BC, and he played for the Chicago Blackhawks in 2010. They won the Stanley Cup. And then he gets traded to the Edmonton Oilers, who are the 30th place team, like one of the worst teams in the league. And they don't even want him, you know. And so it's this bit of a conflict, and he's got this ankle injury. So they get rid of him, and they trade him to the LA Kings. And they find out he has an ankle injury, and they don't want him. So he's not even wanted. And so anyway, he goes and he's playing for the Kings, and they're actually having a pretty good season. This is 2012. And in the 2012 season, the LA Kings make it all the way to the Western Finals. But what happened was this, is that we have Colin Fraser and his family was back in Edmonton, where they were still living, and his son Calder, who was 2 years old, became sick and ended up in the hospital. And so what Colin does is he bolts. He leaves his team in the Western Finals, doesn't even play. And he says, I took planes and trains and automobiles to get back to my family. And he said, for me, it was a no-brainer. Because he says, family comes first, family is forever. Hockey is just a game. This is what he said. And he just abandoned his team, and he went to be with his 2-year-old son. And so his 2-year-old son, by the grace of God, survived in the hospital. And so then Colin goes back to meet the team on the road. By this point, they've actually gone through the finals, and they're actually in the Stanley Cup. So he arrives, oh, I'm back. Oh, yeah, thanks for all your help, Colin. And so the coach puts him on the 4th line. He's on the 4th line. It's the first game of the series against the New Jersey Devils. He goes out on his first line, and he scores the first goal of the Stanley Cup Series, which set up the win for that day, the first win, 2-1 over the Devils. And they go through, and they end up winning the Stanley Cup. Now, here's the best part of the story. So at the end of the game, I mean, you've all seen it dozens of times. The team all gathers together, and they grab the cup, and they hoist it in the air, and here's the picture of it. And so you have the Kings, they've got smiles on their face, and they're kissing the cup, and they're holding it in the air. But where, oh, where is number 24, Colin Fraser? He has skated to the other end of the ice where his family is, and he's not hoisting up the cup. He's hoisting up his 2-year-old son, Calder, because family is what really matters in this life. That's why the foundation is so important, that we would build this thing called a firm foundation for our family, that God would turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest our world be struck with a curse. That's what family's all about. Let's stand together, shall we?
Church of the Rock has services every Sunday at 1397 Buffalo Place, and we invite you to join us when you're in the Winnipeg area. If you'd like a booklet to help you understand more about God's gift of forgiveness and reconciliation through Jesus Christ, please contact us, and we'd be happy to send you a free copy of the Book of Hope. visit our website at www.churchoftherock.ca. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.